Hi, I'm David McCarthy of Heritage Housing Inc. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Topping Off. In our last episode, we gave you a tour of the renovated Barbour Gardens property in Hartford, Connecticut. In this episode, we'll give you the backstory of how Barbour Gardens became a national symbol of decrepit, affordable housing and how we became involved in restoring it.
Out of an NBC News investigation revealing that under the Trump administration and HUD Secretary Ben Carson, the number of families living in squalid conditions in federally subsidized housing has risen significantly, while landlords pocket millions in taxpayer money.
In November 2018, NBC News described terrible living conditions in several Hartford affordable housing complexes, including Barbour Gardens, in an investigation into the US Department of HUD's system for assessing conditions in subsidized housing. This began a chain of events that resulted in HUD revoking its subsidy from Barbour Gardens in February 2019 and relocating all residents from the 84-unit apartment complex. How did this happen? How did conditions in this complex get so bad? The story begins in the 1950s as urban renewal swept across U.S. cities, including Hartford. In the 1950s, cities across the country demolished large areas of what city leaders called slums in order to bring in highways, downtown office complexes, stadiums, hospitals, and other developments. In Hartford, swaths of housing in downtown and the historically black North End neighborhood were leveled to bring in Interstates 84 and 91 and commercial developments. This left a housing shortage, which city leaders solved by building apartment complexes across the city. In 1964, Barbour Gardens opened as subsidized housing in the North End, meant to provide safe, modern housing for those relocated by urban renewal. A newspaper ad from 1964 shows sleek buildings offering good living at exceptionally moderate cost. But troubles soon arise in the new apartment complex. By 1979, tenants were complaining about living conditions at Barbour Gardens, noting dimly lit hallways and safety concerns. One tenant reported having his apartment broken into 7 times in 1.5 years. By 1982, HUD had foreclosed upon the property and offered it for sale. HUD abandoned the original concept for Barbour Gardens, which was moderate income housing subsidized by a low-rate loan, in favor of a Section 8 contract that provided a project-based rental subsidy. Over the years, Barbour Gardens became a troubled property again. The buildings gradually deteriorated from years of neglect, and flaws in their original design created problems throughout the complex. In particular, the galvanized iron drain lines and original 1963 shower faucets and mixers failed, causing water leaks throughout the property, contributing to ceiling failures, rot, mold, and insect infestations. The original double stairwell design was intended to comply with fire code standards, but it resulted in 28 separate points of entry serving 84 apartments, which created security problems across the property. Despite all this, the property still scored 81 points out of 100 on a HUD inspection in 2018. In 2017, a grassroots group in Hartford of religious leaders, tenants, and a not-for-profit began a No More Slumlords campaign, aiming to bring attention to the terrible living conditions in some Hartford affordable housing properties. They held a meeting with HUD and City of Hartford leaders attended by Barbour Gardens tenants, in which they described the terrible living conditions at Barbour Gardens. Their advocacy succeeded in prompting HUD and the City of Hartford to take a closer look at Barbour Gardens. I first visited Barbour Gardens in 2018, the same year it had passed the HUD inspection. I saw ceilings falling in, active leaks, broken floors, crumbling stairwells, and uniformly neglected, deteriorated conditions. During the tour, I noticed a large stack of City of Hartford violations in the management office. I asked about it and found out the property had been issued over 60 individual building code violations by the City of Hartford, following an inspection prompted by the No More Slumlords campaign. Later that year, HUD also ordered a new inspection. Less than 1 year after its passing inspection, the Barbour Gardens property scored 9 points out of 100.
We told you about the problems at the Barbour Garden apartments in Hartford's North End, and from no fire alarm system to mold to faulty plumbing, and recently a backup of sewage there. Tonight, Channel 3
In February 2019, HUD abated Barbour Gardens' federal Section 8 assistance and relocated all of its residents to housing across the Hartford region. Meanwhile, I worked to assemble financing to acquire the troubled property. We had to move fast. First, a massive sewer backup forced the city to relocate dozens of tenants into emergency housing because some of the buildings were condemned. Then, once the property was completely abandoned, we knew it wouldn't be long until vandals broke into them. With support from Capital for Change, a Connecticut non-for-profit lender, we acquired Barbour Gardens in October 2019, only 2 months after the last tenant had moved out. Despite this, vandals had already broken into the buildings and caused extensive damage, removing copper pipes and wires. As described in Episode 1, we assembled new rehab financing and successfully renovated the buildings over the past 18 months. The Barbour Gardens experience asks us the question, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? I caught up with Michael Kilgannon of HUD to find out what they're doing to prevent these kinds of problems. I'm here with Michael Kilgannon from US Department of HUD. Thanks for joining today, Michael.
Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Michael, can you just explain to us the main idea behind NSPIRE, why HUD is making this transition?
To support the health and safety of the residents, the focus is on where they spend most of their time, which would be in their units, their homes. So there's going to be a greater emphasis on units through the NSPIRE inspection. Okay. Much greater. So in the UPCS REAC model, a unit inspection in total would represent possibly 30 to 40% of an overall score of property. That will change. They will be given greater weight to units.
Do you think that NSPIRE will help HUD avoid situations like Barbour Gardens, where the inspection score went from an 81 to a 9 in less than 1 year?
Absolutely. It's a dynamic tool that takes advantages of the current technology. REAC UPCS was developed a quarter of a century ago based on the technology at the time, and it was a very static tool. There were some changes in the guidance that was provided, but in general, the same inspection report carried through for the still carries through, and there's a lot of quirks to it. This tool, NSPIRE, is set up. It's on through a Salesforce platform, if you're familiar with Salesforce. So it's a very dynamic reporting tool. And I think the ability to learn and adapt is what's going to make this a better process. Will there be mistakes? Yes. Will there be a second mistake? Hopefully not for the same reason.
Last question for you. What do you think is the timeline for rolling out NSPIRE completely? I know it's sort of in a test stage at this point.
All right, so public and Indian housing, that is as of April 1st, with the first inspections probably July 1st. For multifamily, such as your site, that will be October 1st.
Okay.
But I expect to see, you should expect to see final notices coming out as to the scoring methodology and the standards that will be applied going forward.
Thank you for taking the time to join me today.
You're very welcome, David. All the best.
Thank you for watching my video. If you liked our content, please give us a like. And if you'd like to get more of it, please follow. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.